In America, a black girl reaching for her ID can still be met with bullets. Aneka Reynolds, 16, never had a chance. Shot 3 times, left bleeding in the street. The cop called it procedure. Another file buried, another name erased. But this time, they didn't just shoot a child, they awakened a storm. Because Annika's mother isn't just a grieving parent, Mariah Reynolds is a former Delta Force commander, and she doesn't cry for justice. She hunts it down. They thought she'd stay quiet, they thought wrong. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments because this fight belongs to all of us. The pan hissed. Mariah's left hand gripped the spatula. Her right steadied the phone on the kitchen counter, screen angled just right to frame her daughter's tired but smiling face. "Mom, practice was brutal," Annika huffed, shifting in the driver's seat, still wearing her cheer uniform. "Coach added 2 more runs after I nailed the routine. Because you showed off again, huh? I mean, maybe." Annika grinned, tucking a stray braid behind her ear. "Anyway, I'm almost—" Blue and red lights flashed behind her through the back window. Mariah's smile dropped. "Where are you?" "Couple blocks from the gym. I didn't do anything. Hold on." The screen jolted as Annika pulled the car to the side. Her fingers moved with practiced calm, steering wheel straight, hazards on, seatbelt visible. 2 officers approached from opposite sides. One was male, mid-50s, bored expression. The other wore mirrored aviators and a tight jawline. Female, white, her badge read Lieutenant L. Camden. "License and ID," Camden barked through the cracked window. "Yes, ma'am. It's right." Annika gestured slowly toward her purse. "I'm reaching for it now." Mariah leaned closer to the screen. "Keep your hands up high, baby." Annika glanced down. "It's right here, Mom. Just a second." Camden's voice rose. "Stop talking. Get it. Now." "Okay," Annika said, lifting her purse into view. "It's in here. I'm just—" 3 shots. No warning. No escalation. No hesitation. The screen exploded in chaos. Mariah screamed without sound as the image twisted. Anika's body jolted violently. A mist of red sprayed the inside of the windshield. Her head slumped sideways, blood soaking her collar. The phone dropped to the floorboard, landing face up in the passenger seat. The image still remains. Annika was motionless. Mariah's knees buckled. She hit the floor of her kitchen, hands still outstretched. Her breath caught in her throat, like her lungs forgot how to expand. The only sound in the room was the bubbling from the forgotten pot. On screen, Anika's body didn't move, not even a twitch. Mariah's hands trembled as she reached for the phone, now lying beside her. She tapped the screen. It was still connected, but nothing changed. Her daughter was still lying there, blood pooling under her torso, limbs crumpled like paper. "Annika," she whispered the name, once, then again, as if calling it might reverse what had just happened. The shot hadn't just torn flesh, it had shattered the line between what was supposed to be safe and what had always been one mistake from becoming fatal. A 16-year-old black girl, in a school uniform, reaching for her ID, on camera, in daylight, with her mother watching live. Mariah curled forward, knuckles to the tile, chest heaving. She had survived 2 tours overseas, led recon in 3 continents, disarmed explosives with her bare hands, but nothing in her career had prepared her to watch her only daughter bleed out through a cracked phone screen. She sat there, just for a second. Then the breath came back, not slow, not soft. It came back as fire. She stood in a single, violent motion. Her keys were already in hand before her thoughts caught up. The screen in the car lit up as she started the engine. Her heart was pounding, but not with panic, with purpose. This wasn't going to end in silence, not with a coroner's press statement, not with another apology that wasn't one, and not with her daughter's face turned into a headline before her body was even moved. As she tore out of the driveway, tires shrieking down the block, her dashboard lit up with notifications. She didn't look at them yet, but they were already there. Pings, alerts, headlines spreading faster than truth. Mariah bolted like a storm, racing toward the hospital. but a very different story had already begun to spread without her. Mariah pushed through the hospital's main entrance, nearly slamming into a nurse wheeling a cart. Her boots echoed down the hallway like gunfire. She didn't wait for the reception. She didn't ask for directions. She just moved, military precision, no wasted motion, toward the trauma wing, phone clenched in her fist, still smeared with her daughter's blood on the screen. As she rounded the corner toward the waiting area outside intensive care, she stopped cold. A flat-screen TV mounted above the nurse's station blared the evening news. Cameras flickered between a police spokesperson and blurred footage of a young girl in a car. Anika. But not the Anika Mariah knew. Not the bright, soft-eyed teenager she had raised with laughter and discipline in equal measure. This image had been altered. Sources confirm the young woman became aggressive, the anchor said. According to officers, she refused to comply, made sudden movements, and appeared to reach for a sharp object. The screen cut to Lieutenant Linda Camden standing at a podium outside Oak Ridge PD. Her uniform pressed tight, mouth tight-lipped, tone detached. "Our officers responded according to protocol," Camden said. "A perceived threat, noncompliance, and a potential weapon were all present in the moment. Body cam footage is, unfortunately, unavailable due to a technical failure." Mariah stared. The room spun slightly, but she didn't blink. The next image was worse. A school portrait of Anika appeared on screen, except it wasn't the original. Her skin was shaded several tones darker. Her smile cropped, her eyes dimmed. Next to her, a Google stock photo of a combat knife, long, serrated, gleaming. The kind used in survival training, not by a 16-year-old girl going home from practice. Mariah felt her spine straighten like steel. There was no knife. There was no aggression. There was a girl in a cheerleading uniform saying, "Yes, ma'am." That was the truth. But truth in America had a short shelf life when you were black. It didn't matter if you followed instructions, kept your hands visible, smiled softly through your fear. It didn't matter if your mother had worn a uniform and bled for this country. If the wrong people with the right power said you were a threat, then you were. And they'd edit you into one before your blood even dried. Her eyes were still fixed on the screen when she heard footsteps behind her. A security guard in a green blazer approached, holding a clipboard like a badge. He stopped a few feet away, lowering his voice like he was delivering a favor instead of a threat. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave this floor." Mariah turned slowly. "Excuse me? We've had reports you're acting erratic. A visitor flagged you as a potential risk to staff. I need you to wait outside until someone can escort you." She blinked. Her daughter was 2 floors above her, bleeding out from 3 bullets. The cops who shot her were being defended on prime time. And now the hospital was trying to escort her out because someone flagged her? Her breath slowed. Her voice dropped to a controlled whisper. "Where is my daughter?" "Ma'am, I don't have that information. You've been told to remove a mother whose child is fighting for her life upstairs?" "I'm just doing my job," the man replied, not unkindly, but with the same kind of institutional distance she'd heard too many times in too many uniforms. Mariah looked past him. The TV was still playing, the image of Anika, the lie, still flickering for everyone to see. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She nodded. "I'll wait," she said quietly, stepping back into the shadows of the corridor, because she knew something the man didn't. She wasn't leaving. She was just getting started. The soft, mechanical hiss of a ventilator was the first sound that broke through the sterile silence of the ICU. Mariah stood at the foot of her daughter's bed, fists clenched so tightly her nails left half-moons in her palms. Anika lay still, unconscious, a breathing tube pressed against lips that once recited Maya Angelou poems from memory. Her chest rose and fell in slow, shallow intervals. Her arms were littered with IV lines, each delivering something vital, none of it enough to reverse what had already been done. A doctor entered quietly behind her, clipboard in hand. Young, Asian American, eyes sharp behind tired glasses, the name tag read, Dr. Natalie Chen. "She made it through the night," Chen said gently, flipping through the chart. but the bullet that passed through her shoulder fragmented. One of the pieces lodged near her spinal cord. Mariah didn't turn. "She's going to walk," she said flatly. "There's a chance," Chen offered carefully, "but paralysis is also a very real outcome. We'll know more in the next 48 hours. Mariah closed her eyes, not out of weakness, but calculation. She needed the information to settle in before she moved. That's what she'd learned in the field. Assess, breathe, respond. "She's 16, Mariah whispered. "She had a scholarship interview next week, a 4.0. She's never even been suspended. And now you're telling me that she might never feel her legs again because a cop saw skin instead of sense?" Dr. Chen swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. I don't need your apology," Mariah said, finally facing her. "I need the truth, and I need it now." Before the conversation could deepen, the door cracked open. A woman stepped in. Tall, Hispanic, late 40s, short-cropped hair, no makeup, civilian clothes, but a soldier's presence, unmistakable. Her name had once appeared beside Mariah's on black-inked mission orders in countries no one admitted they operated in. "Diana," Mariah said, her voice catching only slightly. "Mariah." Diana Flores nodded once, then looked past her to Anika. Her jaw flexed. "They shot your girl 3 times. There was no small talk between them. War burns away useless things. I saw the news," Diana said. "Saw how they're painting her. Aggressive, non-compliant, no footage, same playbook." Mariah stepped into the hallway and Diana followed. The door to the ICU shut softly behind them. "What are you doing here?" Mariah asked. "I had a feeling you'd need someone who knew how deep this rabbit hole goes." "They're already burying evidence," Mariah replied, calling her unstable, saying she reached for a weapon. That was her driver's license. "I know," Diana said, her eyes narrowing, "and I also know this smells worse than a bad traffic stop." The edits to her photo, the missing footage, the immediate press coverage, this wasn't reactive. It was planned. Mariah's pulse quickened. "Why her?" Diana shook her head. "It's not just her. There's a pattern. Minorities getting pulled into behavioral facilities. Records sealed. Families paid off or silenced. Some never hear from their kids again." Mariah's spine went stiff. "So this, what they're doing to Antika, is this a system?" "It's bigger than you think," Diana said, voice low, "and it's protected. By uniforms, by offices, by people who look polished when they lie." Mariah didn't flinch. "Then we go through them, one by one." Diana held her gaze. "This isn't Kandahar. These people use lawsuits and sealed files instead of bullets. You go after them with what you know, and they'll erase you before you make it to court." Mariah's face was calm, but her voice sharpened. "Annika is not collateral. She's not a symbol. She's my daughter. She sings gospel off key, dances barefoot in the hallway, and still kisses me on the cheek before school. I will not bury her, and I will not let them rewrite her. You know, once you start down this road, there's no way back." Mariah stepped in close. "I didn't survive war zones to bow to cowards with badges. I'm not afraid of how hard it'll be. I'm afraid of what happens if I don't fight." Diana nodded, the soldier in her rising. "Then let's start with the inside. Every cover-up has a crack. I need data," Mariah said. "Medical records, internal messages, tampered reports. If this was planned, there's a trail." Dr. Chen re-entered, quietly observing them. "There's someone you can talk to," she offered, voice cautious. "Elijah. Works in IT downstairs. He's good with digital records. Quiet, keeps his head down." Mariah narrowed her eyes. "Can he be trusted?" Chen hesitated, then nodded. "I think so." But trust was something Mariah had learned not to give easily, especially not when someone had the power to manipulate what counted as real. Still, she needed access, and Elijah held keys to systems that could expose the rot they were smelling. She took a deep breath, locked eyes with Diana once more, and turned toward the elevator. The lab was colder than necessary, with harsh white lights buzzing overhead and a faint antiseptic sting hanging in the air. Mariah stood just inside the double doors, her arms crossed over her chest, eyes locked on the rows of refrigerators humming along the back wall. On the far side, Elijah tapped at a terminal, fingers moving fast, but his eyes were slower, watching her, calculating. He had the look of someone who'd spent most of his life surrounded by screens instead of people. Slouched posture, thick glasses, a hoodie zipped halfway over his scrubs, but his hands were steady, and his silence carried weight. "You said you wanted records," Elijah mumbled. "You're not gonna like what you see." "I'm not here for comfort," Mariah said. He glanced at her, then turned the monitor so she could see. A digital file blinked to life on the screen. Anika's chart, date stamped less than 12 hours ago. He clicked a tab labeled Toxicology. "Here," he said. "Initial test flagged negative for all substances." I accessed the time-stamped log. This was the first result uploaded by the machine itself. He clicked again. The data vanished, replaced by a nearly identical file, except now the toxicology report read positive for low levels of THC and amphetamines. The edit was time-stamped 20 minutes later. No lab notes, no new sample collected. "Someone overrode it," Elijah said quietly. "They made it look like your daughter was high and twitching, like she was unstable." Mariah leaned in, face impassive. "Who has access to this system?" "Technically, 4 people in this hospital. Realistically, anyone with clearance and a reason not to ask questions." Dr. Chen entered a moment later, lab coat swinging behind her, face pale and tight. She saw the screen and didn't blink. "They've already started," she said under her breath. "Started what?" Mariah asked. Chen looked at Elijah. "Can you step out for a minute?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll be around the corner." The door clicked shut behind him. Mariah turned to face her. What aren't you telling me?" Chen hesitated, visibly weighing every word before speaking. "There's a directive. Not public, not written, but it's there. I've heard it whispered in medical briefings more than once." Mariah didn't interrupt. She knew this tone. It was the voice people used when they'd kept something buried long enough that it began to rot. Chen took a breath. "When black patients are admitted after police use of force incidents, especially minors, we're encouraged to record signs of aggression, agitation, substance influence, anything that supports the officer's perception of threat. The idea is to protect the hospital from litigation and keep things in alignment with police reports." Mariah stared at her. "You're telling me this is routine?" "Not for everyone," Chen said quickly. "There are good doctors here, but the pressure, it's subtle. It's institutional. You alter one word here, one note there, and suddenly it's no longer a tragedy. It's a justification." Silence settled between them, thick and hot. "You altered Anika's chart?" Mariah asked. "No," Chen said firmly. "I refused, but someone else did. And if we don't act fast, the false version will overwrite the original permanently in the next system sync." Mariah's jaw tightened. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 2 hours," Chen said. 3, if we're lucky." Mariah nodded, already calculating. "I want a printed copy of the original and I want it now. Digital backups, too. Anything they can't scrub without pulling wires out of walls." Chen moved to the printer without another word. Mariah's fingers drummed against the counter. This wasn't about one test. It was about a narrative. They weren't just trying to criminalize a child. They were laying the foundation for the public to accept her execution as protocol. One drop of falsified ink at a time. A sheet spat out of the printer. Chen handed it to her. "This is the original," she said. "Keep it hidden. Don't trust the hospital's internal network. They'll be watching now." Mariah scanned the page. No drugs, no behavioral flags, a clean toxicology report for a girl who had done nothing wrong. The truth, in black and white. But the truth, Mariah knew, was fragile in this country, especially when it wore black skin. She folded the paper carefully and tucked it beneath her coat. Before she could speak again, her phone buzzed. A message from the ICU. Patient awake, conscious, stable for short conversation. Mariah's heart caught. When she entered the room minutes later, Anika was barely upright, pale and shivering beneath thin hospital sheets. Her eyes fluttered open. Her mouth moved slowly, as if even words were too heavy. "They're gonna move me," she whispered. Mariah sat down, gently taking her hand. "I heard them," Annika rasped. "They said they'd give me something. A drug. Makes you forget who you are. What happened?" Mariah's grip tightened. The pen might have signed the lie. But now, someone was planning to erase her child completely. The knock was soft, almost polite. 3 short raps on the metal hospital room door. Mariah was at Anika's bedside, wiping her daughter's forehead with a cool cloth, her fingers moving with practiced tenderness that belied the storm inside her chest. The door opened without waiting for permission. 2 men stepped inside wearing generic gray uniforms with laminated badges clipped to their belts. They weren't hospital staff. Their shirts bore the emblem of Richland Youth Behavioral Center, a name that meant nothing to Mariah, and yet immediately set every nerve on edge. One of them, tall, with thinning hair and the voice of a corporate manager, cleared his throat. "We're here to transport the patient. Orders came in this morning. She's being transferred to a specialized recovery facility for cognitive stabilization." Mariah didn't move. No one said anything about a transfer. He offered a clipboard, his tone robotic. "It's standard procedure. Psychological evaluation after trauma-related aggression, paperwork, all in order." Mariah stepped forward, unblinking. "You don't get to touch her until I see a physician's signature, an attending clearance, and a judge's order authorizing the move of a minor." The second man shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. The first gave a forced smile. "Ma'am, this is routine for her safety, for the staff's. She's not violent," Mariah said, voice rising. "She's a victim, and you're not moving her anywhere. We're just following the directive. Then you'd better bring it in writing. Signed, stamped, and legally binding. Until then, step back." Behind them, a nurse peeked in, startled by the sudden rise in tension. The men didn't move. Mariah reached for her phone. That changed everything. The taller one raised his voice slightly and gestured toward his belt radio. "We may need security assistance in room 415. Non-compliant guardian." Within seconds, 2 hospital guards appeared, hands hovering near batons, eyes already judging her skin before hearing her words. "This is her mother," one of the guards muttered to the other. "She's been flagged." "Flagged for what?" Mariah snapped, stepping between the men and Annika's bed. "For asking questions? For protecting my child?" Tension coiled in the room. The 2 transport officers made a move toward the bed. Mariah squared her stance. She didn't have a weapon, but she didn't need one. The set of her shoulders and the fury in her eyes said more than any firearm. "You lay a hand on her," she said, "and I swear—" "Ma'am," one of the guards barked, "this isn't helping." But before they could act, a new voice cut in from the hallway. "Back off." Dr. Chen strode into the room, coat flaring slightly with each step. Her badge was out. Her authority is unmistakable. There's been no signed discharge, no psychiatric referral, and no attending approval for transfer. You're not moving her. The men hesitated. Chen turned to Mariah and spoke low. "They're not going to stop." "What do you mean?" "I heard them," she said. "Downstairs, in the physician's lounge. A consultant, didn't recognize him, said they'd begin chemical silencing tonight if she wasn't transferred. Something called extended neurosuppressant therapy. Experimental, not FDA approved. Used on minors in juvenile psych wards to disassociate memory from trauma." Mariah's face went cold. "They're not treating her," Chen said. "They're trying to erase her." Anika stirred, half-conscious, hearing enough to mumble, "Mom, don't let them." Mariah held her hand, voice steady despite the fire building in her chest. "They're not taking you, baby. I promise." But promises meant nothing in a system built to override them. Annika's name had already been added to a list, a digital corridor of shadows where young black lives were redirected before they could testify, before they could become symbols of injustice. Chen nodded subtly toward the guards. "They're waiting for backup. You need to step out now. Quietly, I'll stall them." Mariah hesitated. Then she turned, kissed Anika's forehead, and left the room. As she walked down the hall, every fiber of her body vibrated with rage. This wasn't bureaucracy. This wasn't protocol. This was weaponized silence, cloaked in procedural language. She called Diana before she reached the parking lot. "They're drugging her," Mariah said without preamble. "Not for healing, to wipe her clean, to make her forget she was ever shot. Forget me." Diana's voice dropped to a growl. "Who ordered it? Elijah knows something. He's not just a tech. He's part of a larger chain. And it smells like federal." There was a beat of silence. "Then we start digging," Diana said, "because this isn't just a hospital anymore. This is a machine, and it's protecting itself." And for the first time since the bullets flew, Mariah realized she wasn't just fighting for her daughter's justice. She was fighting to keep her daughter whole before the system stripped away even her memory of being wounded. Mariah sat alone in the hospital stairwell, hunched over her knees, breath shallow, fingers trembling around the last text Anika had sent. She had been gone less than an hour, taken while Mariah was in the parking lot making calls. No signatures, no paper trail, just an empty room and a nurse who didn't see anything. Security claimed they had no footage. The guards who had flagged her were suddenly off shift. The doctor who vouched for her daughter's stability had been reassigned, and Anika disappeared. The silence rang louder than any siren. "I left her," Mariah whispered, voice cracking. "I turned my back, just long enough." Diana crouched beside her. "You didn't fail her. You exposed them. That's why they're moving this fast. You forced their hand." Mariah looked up, eyes wild with grief and rage. "They're drugging kids, Diana. My kid. And we let them vanish her like a file off a hard drive. We're going to find her," Diana said firmly. "But we stop reacting now. We start digging." They went to work, hitting phone records, backtracking badge scans, cross-referencing staff IDs with federal registries. The deeper they went, the uglier it got. It led to Elijah. The hum of servers echoed through the sublevel corridor, a dull, mechanical rhythm vibrating off cement walls lined with conduit and wire. It was nearly 1 a.m. Most of the hospital had gone still, except down here, beneath the wards and sterile white hallways, where secrets didn't sleep. Mariah moved with purpose, boots silent on the floor, shoulders tight beneath her jacket. Diana followed a few paces behind, eyes scanning the shadows. They weren't armed, not conventionally, but both women carried something far more dangerous than weapons. Questions no one wanted answered. They found Elijah in the network maintenance room, bathed in blue light from half a dozen monitors. He didn't turn around when the door opened, didn't flinch when Mariah stepped forward and closed it behind her with a soft click that sounded like a locked cell. "You know where they took her?" Mariah said. Elijah's fingers paused mid-keystroke, then resumed. "You don't belong down here," he muttered. "I said," Mariah's voice sharpened, "you know where my daughter is." Now he turned, slowly, pushing up his glasses with the back of one knuckle. The facade of nervous tech support was gone. In its place stood something colder, not indifferent, detached, like someone watching a simulation, not a family unravel. "You're digging too deep, Captain," he said. "You're not authorized to see the bottom." Mariah stepped closer, fists clenched. "That's my child. Don't talk to me about authorization." Elijah studied her, then let out a quiet exhale. "I told them this would happen, that bringing in someone with your background was reckless, but the Bureau's arrogance is louder than its caution." Diana's voice cut in. "Bureau?" Elijah nodded slowly. "I wasn't always in hospital IT. Before this, I worked for the Behavioral Integrity Division, an experimental unit inside the FBI tasked with identifying pre-disruptive behavioral anomalies." Mariah frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means," Elijah said flatly, "they profile potential civil unrest the same way they profile terror threats, minority communities, families with prior military connections, anyone with the resources and moral clarity to challenge the state. You checked every box." Mariah's jaw tightened. And Annika? She was a control variable, Elijah said. A test case. Young, bright, clean record, but raised by someone dangerous enough to be labeled subversive. The theory was that early psychological destabilization would reduce the likelihood of intergenerational descent. Destabilization? Diana snapped. You mean shooting a kid in a car and erasing her records? Elijah didn't blink. They prefer the term preemptive systemic reclassification. Mariah moved before she could think, grabbed the collar of his hoodie and slammed him back against the server rack, her face inches from his. Say her name. Elijah, Diana barked, stepping in. You say her name. Right now. He hesitated, breath shallow, eyes flicking from one woman to the other. Annika Reynolds. Mariah released him with a shove, turning away before the rage spiraled out of control. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. You helped them disappear, my daughter. I protected her, Elijah said. The transfer team had instructions to sedate and relocate her off record. I rerouted them to Richland instead of Quantico. She's not where they think she is. You still have time. You did it for leverage, Diana said. So we'd come to you. Elijah didn't deny it. This system, he said, wasn't built for justice. It was built for preservation. The public thinks justice is blind, but inside it sees everything. Skin, surname, scars, and calculates outcomes accordingly. You can't fix it from the outside. You either disappear trying or become useful from within. Mariah's back straightened. You think your usefulness justifies what they did to her? No, Elijah said, voice quieter, but I'm still here, and that means I can help you bring it down. Mariah turned. Why now? Because you're not just another angry parent, he said. You're a tactician. You're trained. And most importantly, you haven't broken it yet. Diana stepped forward. Then start talking. Full access. Routes, logs, comms, everything you have in Richland. Elijah nodded toward his terminal. It's all here, but it's coded deep. You'll need more than me. Mariah met Diana's eyes. The silent understanding passed between them like a switch flipping in the dark. It's time, Mariah said. We bring the unit back. Diana's mouth pulled into a half smile, tired, proud, and laced with fire. I'll make the calls. The warehouse stood on the edge of nowhere, a skeletal relic of industrial ambition long since abandoned. Its corrugated walls rattled faintly in the wind, and a family of crows watched from a bent lamppost as a nondescript van pulled into the loading bay. Inside, under rusted rafters and the glow of portable lights, ghosts of war took shape again. Mariah stepped through the double doors first, boots crunching on broken glass. Behind her, Diana followed with the steel case in one hand and a file of encrypted briefings in the other. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The room was already waiting. Kiara Grant was seated in front of a wall of monitors, fingers moving like a concert pianist across a keyboard wired to satellite uplinks and VPN tunnels. Her hair was shaved high and tight, her stare flat behind thick lenses. Jordan Blitz Hayes leaned against a support beam, tossing a throwing knife between gloved hands, the way some women fidgeted with jewelry. And Lena Torres, once the best combat medic in their unit, now a quiet physician running a free clinic for undocumented families, stood quietly by the medical crates she'd hauled in herself. When Mariah entered, they stood. No salute, no ceremony, only respect. Diana broke the silence. We're active again. Blitz raised an eyebrow. This wasn't supposed to happen. Mariah nodded. None of it was, but they took my daughter, and they're not just trying to kill her, they're trying to erase her. Kiara spoke without looking up. I've been monitoring government chatter since you called. There's been encrypted comms bouncing between a blacklisted behavioral facility and a front company in D.C. They call it Richland Youth Behavioral Center, but its original name, according to declassified intel from 2008, was something else. She typed a final command. The screen blinked. Federal Juvenile Adjustment Program. Pilot Site Number 3. They renamed it after whistleblower reports surfaced. Young Black and Latino teens sent there for behavioral reconditioning. Most of them never came out the same. Broken speech, memory gaps, complete personality flattening, chemical-induced compliance. Jordan crossed her arms. A modern lobotomy factory. Worse, Lena said. They don't need surgery when they've got pharmacological warfare, long-term cognitive erasure under the guise of therapy. Mariah's jaw clenched. Do we have proof she's there? Kiara smiled without warmth. We've got better. We've got eyes. She pulled up thermal satellite footage, grainy black and white scans of the Richland compound, guards patrolling in patterns too disciplined for healthcare staff, drones on the perimeter. And in the center, an isolated building with lead lining and no recorded heat signatures, except one. There. Kiara zoomed in. That's your girl. She's alive. Weak, sedated, but not broken. The room went still. Then Jordan slid her knife into a sheath. Give me a window. I'll get her out. Mariah shook her head. We don't go in loud, not unless we have to. We do this clean, quiet, strategic. Diana unfolded a schematic blueprint. There's a service tunnel beneath the north end. Maintenance access disguised as an irrigation shaft. It runs under the complex. If we cut security from inside and knock their comms blind, we have 15 minutes tops before backup arrives. Mariah looked at each of them. These weren't just former soldiers. They were survivors, mothers, protectors. Each of them had buried comrades, lost pieces of themselves in forgotten wars, and come home to a country that never truly welcomed them back. But they had never stopped fighting. And now they would fight for a child they had never met. They call it a recovery center, Mariah said, voice steady. Jordan spat. They can call it a country club. No, Mariah replied. They call it recovery. But for us, for our children, it's a memory graveyard. The words hung heavy. Lena opened a med kit, began prepping light stimulants and detox packs. We go in tomorrow night, Diana confirmed. We do this right. And, as the team moved into position, checking gear, syncing watches, reviewing routes, miles away in the heart of Richland, Anika Reynolds lay half awake on a plastic cot, her thoughts flickering like a candle in a hurricane. But even through the fog, she remembered her mother's voice, and she had a plan. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above Anika's head, casting a sterile glare across the gray walls of the isolation room. She lay still beneath a thin blanket, eyes half-lidded, muscles slack. The sedatives they administered were heavy, but not as effective as the staff believed. She'd trained her mind, just like her mother taught her. Breathing techniques, muscle control, how to play weak until the right moment. And now the right moment had come. Her fingers moved slowly beneath the sheets, gripping the edge of the small medical tape recorder hidden beneath the mattress. A relic from a nurse who'd taken quiet pity on her, Rosa, a young woman with soft eyes and a Haitian accent, who whispered to Anika on the second night, "They don't like it when we think too much. But I'm still thinking. So should you." Anika coughed twice, short, deliberate. The door creaked open. Camden entered first. Lieutenant Linda Camden didn't wear a uniform anymore. Not here. She didn't need to. Her presence carried the weight of authority more than any badge. Following behind her was a man in a lab coat, older, thin-framed, glasses slipping down his nose, clutching a clipboard he wouldn't dare read aloud unless instructed. "She's still lucid," Camden said, crossing the room. "I want that corrected by morning." "She's metabolizing the sedatives unusually fast," the doctor replied. "Might be genetic resilience, or training." Camden scoffed. "Of course she's trained. Look at who her mother is." Anika's breath hitched, but she didn't flinch. "What's the next stage?" Camden asked. The doctor hesitated. "I can begin a DRIP protocol, neurochemical disruption using high-dose dopamine antagonists. It won't erase memories, but it'll impair emotional recall, break the fight reflex at a neurological level." Camden's tone was almost casual. "So she'll know what happened, just won't feel it anymore? She'll feel confused, fatigue. She'll doubt herself. That's enough." Camden stepped closer to the bed, looking down at Anika like she was inspecting a faulty weapon. "By the time her mother finds her, if she ever does, this girl will barely remember her own name, let alone why she was fighting. The doctor shifted uncomfortably. "You're aware the dosage exceeds the ethical threshold for—" "We crossed ethical thresholds when we allowed a Delta Force captain to raise a daughter unchecked," Camden said. "We're not correcting a mistake. We're preventing a legacy." They left. The door shut. Annika waited, counted to 20, then pressed stop. 2 hours later, Rosa slid into the room during her rounds, heart pounding as Anika slid the device into her palm. "Please," Anika whispered, "make sure someone hears it." "I will," Rosa said softly. "I know someone who can." Miles away, in the warehouse safe house, Kiara's fingers flew over the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled in columns, firewalls dropped like dominoes, and the audio file from Rosa's encrypted transfer opened in a wave format on screen. Mariah stood frozen, listening. "She'll barely remember her own name," Camden's voice echoed, flat and chilling. Diana swore under her breath. "I'm pulling metadata," Kiara said quickly. "We need proof this isn't fabricated." She zoomed into the file's background data, tracing digital fingerprints across the transfer. Her eyes widened. "Well, damn, that's unexpected." "What?" Mariah snapped. Kiara turned the monitor. "This file passed through a proxy node registered to the FBI's Integrity Division. Someone in the Bureau is already watching Camden. They've been tracking this facility, but they haven't moved. My guess? They're building a case and waiting for the perfect time to strike." Mariah's voice was quiet. "My daughter doesn't have time for them to build a case." "No, she doesn't," Diana agreed. The air in the warehouse shifted. What had been fear became precision. What had been planned became the purpose. "We go in now," Mariah said, tone like iron. Kiara nodded. "I'll scramble their internal comms. Jordan will have visual lockdown of every angle within 5 minutes of entry. Lena's prepping medical evac. And you," she looked at Mariah, "you get your daughter back." Mariah didn't blink. "Not just my daughter. Every child they've drugged, silenced, and buried in that place. This ends tonight." The van sliced through the back roads of Oak Ridge like a shadow on wheels. Inside, the Artemis unit sat in silence, bodies still, minds racing. Night wrapped around them, but inside the vehicle a quiet storm brewed. Mariah sat in the front beside Jordan, eyes fixed forward. Diana scanned the map spread across her tablet, highlighting the subterranean approach beneath Richland. In the back, Kiara's laptop glowed faint blue, casting sharp lines across her focused face. Lena Torres sat by the rear doors, unusually still, her jaw locked and hands fidgeting with the zipper on her tactical vest. Everything was synchronized, every angle covered, every step was rehearsed, until Kiara froze. "Wait," she muttered, fingers darting across keys. "What is it?" Diana asked, voice tight. "There's a beacon broadcasting from this van." Kiara's tone dropped an octave. "Encrypted, disguised as a ping from local telecoms, but it's not ambient, it's directional." Mariah spun in her seat. "You're telling me we're being tracked? Not just tracked?" Kiara's brow furrowed. "We're being streamed." A ripple of tension pulsed through the van. Jordan's grip tightened on the wheel. Kiara stood abruptly, her eyes narrowing on Lena. "Your med pack. Hand it over." Lena blinked. "Excuse me?" "Now," Mariah ordered. Lena hesitated, then slowly unzipped the lower pouch and slid it forward. Kiara took it, flipped it over, and found the transmitter embedded beneath the lining, blinking faint red. "Son of a—" Jordan cursed. Mariah stood up, every part of her body coiled in fury. "Talk." Lena met her gaze, her voice low but unwavering. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I was trying to buy time." "Buy time for who?" Diana snapped. Lena swallowed. "My sister. She's 17. The FBI threatened to charge her as an adult for something she didn't even do. Said they'd make it stick unless I cooperated. So you sold us out." Jordan's voice was ice. "No," Lena snapped, her voice cracking with guilt. "I stalled them, fed them slow coordinates, slipped in misinformation. But they said if I didn't confirm the infiltration tonight, they'd transfer her into custody, disappear her the same way they did Annika." Silence stretched heavy in the van. Then, without a word, Lena reached into her vest, pulled the device out with both hands, and slammed it against the steel floor. It cracked open like a broken lie. She stomped on it, metal crunching under her boot until the light stopped blinking. "I owe my sister," she said, her voice steady, "but I owe Annika more. I owe all of you more." Mariah didn't speak for a long moment. Then, finally, she nodded once. "We all have people we'd burn the world to protect. What matters is where we draw the line." Kiara picked up the broken transmitter. "It's fried. They'll know we caught it, which means they'll double the guards," Jordan muttered. "Then we double our resolve," Diana said. "Lena, can you still give us a way in?" Lena took a deep breath. "There's a utility corridor under the west perimeter, used for biohazard waste. It's unmonitored between midnight and 12:07 a.m. I didn't tell the Bureau about that one." "Then that's our window," Mariah said. "One chance. No room for hesitation." The team nodded. No one questioned. No one looked back. As the van rolled forward through the night, each woman tightened her gear, locked her weapon, and focused her breath. They weren't marching into combat. They were descending into the underbelly of a system that had learned to wear scrubs and clipboards while committing atrocities. And this time, it wasn't just about extraction. It was about exposure. They had 7 minutes to reach the girl before the drugs reached her mind. 7 minutes to pull a daughter from the edge of a forced erasure. And now, with betrayal burned away, they had everything they needed to bring Annika home. The cold stench of mold and chemical runoff clung to the air inside the drainage tunnel. Mariah moved first, knee-deep in stagnant water, her breaths controlled, steady, eyes scanning the darkness ahead. Behind her, Diana whispered coordinates into a comlink. Kiara clutched her signal disruptor like it was a beating heart. Jordan checked her rifle one last time, and Lena silently recited emergency dosages for neurological recovery. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were ghosts, sliding beneath the radar of a system too bloated by its own impunity to notice when judgment crawled in through the floor. Kiara's device buzzed once in her hand. She smiled. "We're dark. Cameras are blind for 6 minutes, 54 seconds. Then we moved," Mariah ordered. The underbelly of the Richland Youth Behavioral Center wasn't listed on any blueprint available to the public. Lena had stolen the true schematics from the Department of Health's archive using a badge she hadn't worn in 7 years. That badge wouldn't help them now. What mattered was the ventilation shaft above them, the one leading straight into the isolation wing where Annika was being held. Jordan hoisted the grate silently, propping it open as Diana boosted Mariah upward. The narrow crawl space was tight and slick with condensation, but Mariah didn't flinch. She moved like she had through caves in Kandahar, through basements in Fallujah, body low, steps precise, mind locked on the objective. At the end of the shaft, a thin aluminum panel blocked her entry. She tested it, unbolted. Too easy. She kicked once. The panel gave. She dropped through the ceiling of Anika's cell like a falling prayer. The room was sterile, white-tiled, windowless. A single monitor beeped a lazy rhythm next to a hospital bed. Annika lay motionless beneath the glow of fluorescent lights, her wrists strapped loosely with soft restraints, a line running from her arm into a bag marked with a red biohazard sticker. Her eyelids fluttered in shallow intervals, lips parted, barely breathing. Mariah's heart seized. She crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled the IV from Anika's arm with one clean motion. Blood bubbled at the puncture point. Annika gasped, but didn't scream. Her eyes fluttered open. "Mom, I'm here, baby." Mariah's voice cracked, trembling between rage and relief. Annika blinked slowly, pupils unfocused, but her voice was clear. "I stayed awake. I knew you'd come." Mariah pulled her daughter into her arms. Annika sagged against her, light as bone, but conscious. Her skin was cool, her breath shallow but steady. It was enough. Behind her, the door hissed. Jordan stepped in, rifle ready. Perimeter still quiet. "We've got 2 minutes." Diana followed, carrying a satchel of emergency supplies. She handed a stimulant injector to Mariah without speaking. Mariah plunged it into Anika's thigh. The girl jolted. Outside the door, an alarm wailed to life. Lights pulsed red. The corridor echoed with running boots. "Time's up," Kiara's voice crackled through the comm. "Internal override just triggered. They know we're here." Mariah pulled Anika to her feet. The girl wobbled, her knees buckling. Lena stepped in, wrapping an arm around her. "I've got her. Move." They exited into the hallway like smoke, quiet but unstoppable. Kiara rerouted them through maintenance corridors while Jordan cleared each corner with lethal calm. Diana laid down jamming signals to block emergency radio traffic. Still, the walls shook with warning sirens. From one end of the hall, 2 guards emerged, clad in medical scrubs but armed like mercenaries. "Down!" Jordan barked, opening fire with pinpoint precision. The guards dropped before they could raise their rifles. "Keep moving," Mariah said, shielding Anika with her own body. They reached the loading dock exit seconds before the security gate slammed shut. Kiara overrode the lock with one flick of her wrist, and the Artemis unit burst into the night air, carrying Anika like she was light, like she was holy, like there was nothing in the world they wouldn't do to keep her breathing. Mariah didn't look back. Not at the facility, not at the bodies, not at the people who built a machine to erase her daughter's name from history. She held Anika close, her steps never slowing. Behind them, sirens wailed. Helicopter rotors stirred the treetops, and ahead, a van waited, headlights low, engine running. They dove inside, slamming the doors shut as Diana peeled out onto the forest road. Only then did Anika let out a full breath. Only then did Mariah let herself believe they might survive this. But survival had a cost, because as the van merged onto the county road, the radio blared. Breaking news from Oak Ridge, where authorities allege former Army Captain Mariah Reynolds, previously discharged for psychological instability, has abducted a minor from a licensed state rehabilitation center. Lieutenant Linda Camden, a decorated officer with a history of public service, confirms Reynolds poses a threat to national stability and may be acting as part of an anti-government extremist group. Mariah stared at the dashboard. The enemy wasn't just behind them anymore. It had stepped into the spotlight, and it was rewriting the story before they could even speak. Anika, slumped in her mother's arms, whispered, "They're already painting you as the villain." Mariah kissed her forehead. "They're scared of the truth, baby. That means we're finally close." And as the van disappeared into the ink-black road, another war was already waiting. This time not behind barbed wire or tactical walls, but on screens, in headlines, in the court of public opinion. They had rescued the girl, but now they'd have to rescue the truth. The sun hadn't yet risen over Oak Ridge when Linda Camden stepped onto the set of a national morning broadcast, her face composed, her uniform immaculate, her voice ready. The studio lights framed her like a heroine, and the chyron beneath her name read, "Lieutenant Camden speaks out." She looked into the camera, gaze steely. "We are dealing with a highly unstable individual," she said. "Captain Mariah Reynolds, while once a respected veteran, has exhibited clear signs of post-traumatic delusion. The system tried to help her, but now she's gone rogue, armed, dangerous, and deluded." Across the country, television screens lit up with Camden's version of the truth. News anchors parroted her phrases. Former Delta Force, psychological red flags, resisting treatment, abducting a minor from a licensed medical facility. Within an hour, they were rolling out exclusive footage. A fuzzy video of Mariah dragging Anika down a hallway under red emergency lights, stripped of context, amplified by commentary. "She seems agitated," one anchor commented. "It's tragic. PTSD is real, but violence is never the answer." Social media caught fire. Articles appeared in lockstep, all citing anonymous law enforcement sources. A Facebook post from a woman claiming to be Mariah's former neighbor in Fayetteville read, "I always thought she was off, always barking orders, walking around like she was still in the army. I'm not surprised." Even former military forums hesitated. Some defended her, but many said the same thing. She went too far. Mariah watched it all unfold from the shadows of an abandoned safe house 20 miles outside city limits. holding her daughter close as the world twisted her into a caricature. Her hands shook, not from fear, but fury. She wasn't just being hunted. She was being rewritten. "Mom," Anika said quietly, watching the screen, "they're erasing you." Mariah stood. "Then it's time they saw me for themselves." She took out her phone. "Are you sure?" Diana asked. She had been silent for most of the day, her usual commanding presence dimmed by the weight of seeing their sister-in-arms dragged through the mud. "They wanted to paint me as the villain?" Mariah said. "Fine, but they'll have to do it with my voice still ringing in their ears." She opened the camera, steadied the frame, and pressed record. "My name is Mariah Reynolds," she began, her voice low and unflinching. "I served this country for 20 years in uniform. I led women into battles no one back home even knew were happening. I was decorated not because I wanted medals, but because I knew how to bring my people back alive. And I came back to this country thinking I could raise my daughter in peace." Her eyes didn't blink. They burned. 2 weeks ago, Anika was shot by police during a routine traffic stop. She was unarmed. She was respectful. She was 16 years old. I watched it happen, in real time, on a FaceTime call, because the only thing more dangerous than being a black girl in America is reaching for your phone while being one. The silence behind the lens grew heavy. Since then, I've watched them try to kill her twice more. Not with bullets, but with lies. They tried to erase her name, alter her medical files, and bury her alive in a psychiatric facility disguised as a treatment center. And now, because I got her out, because I refused to bury my child before she even got a chance to live, suddenly, I'm the terrorist? Mariah stepped closer to the lens, her voice cutting sharper. I am not the threat. I am the mother. And I did what any mother would do when her child was hunted, drugged, and lied about by a system designed to protect itself. I didn't go to war to come home and watch my daughter be sacrificed to statistics. You want to know what PTSD looks like? It's watching your baby bleed through a phone screen and hearing the world call it protocol. She held up a photo of Anika before the shooting, smiling, alive. This is who they tried to silence. Then she ended the recording. Kiara uploaded the video to 4 encrypted platforms simultaneously. Within 30 minutes, it began spreading like fire. Mariah didn't trend this time. She stormed the feed. The video cracked the noise of mainstream outlets, breaking through curated headlines and polished denial. People began reposting it under a new hashtag, @NotATerrorist. Veterans groups reshared it with captions like, "We know one of our own when we see her." Civil rights advocates quoted her lines, word for word. Overnight, she transformed from fugitive to frontline witness. Even late-night hosts chimed in. "Wait, so let me get this straight," one joked. A mother saves her daughter from a drug-laced psychiatric ward, and the police response is, "She's dangerous?" Man, if white moms did this, they'd be in a Lifetime movie by now. Mariah's truth had found its own battleground, and for once, it was fighting back. Inside the safe house, the women of Artemis sat quietly as the video reached its first 1,000,000 views. Aneka, still weak, watched her mother's face on screen and whispered, "You didn't just save me. You gave me back my name." Mariah didn't reply. She didn't need to, because as the screen refreshed again, a new notification popped up. It was from the FBI Integrity Division. A single sentence, "We're listening." And in the span of one viral video, the ground had shifted. Not completely, not forever, but enough to begin the reckoning. The message arrived in a ciphered email, only readable through a triple encrypted browser that Kiara had set up weeks ago. It contained a phone number, a time, and 3 words. "We believe you." Mariah didn't hesitate. Inside an unmarked federal building in Washington, D.C., far from the cameras and microphones that flooded Oak Ridge, Special Agent Nora Jenkins adjusted her earpiece as the secure video line flickered to life. Her voice was calm, her tone clipped with urgency. "Captain Reynolds," she said, nodding at the monitor, "we've been watching, listening." Behind her, the seal of the FBI's Integrity Division glinted faintly on the glass wall. Mariah leaned into frame, Kiara beside her. Then why the silence? Jenkins didn't flinch. Because we were told to stay out. Officially, Camden and her network fall under the jurisdiction of the State Bureau. Unofficially, we've been building a case for 2 years. She tapped her screen. Camden's connections run deeper than local politics. She's linked to state contracts, private security kickbacks, and sealed indictments. But nothing's stuck. Not without a witness, not without exposure. Kiara forwarded the encrypted files. "Here's your exposure," she said flatly. The screen flooded with documentation. The altered medical records, internal memos from the Department of Health, surveillance footage from the Richland facility, and, at the center of it all, Anika's recording. Linda Camden's voice, cold and clinical, laying out how they would chemically disarm a teenage girl to silence her. Jenkins exhaled. This is what we needed." She looked back at Mariah. "You just gave us probable cause. But listen closely. Camden knows we're circling. She's packing up, planning to leave the state within 48 hours. Our intel suggests she's already shredding evidence and prepping her final fallback, a private hunting lodge in Jasper County. No cameras, no oversight. And it's where she stashed the hard drives. What's she trying to hide?" Mariah asked, jaw tight. "Everything," Jenkins said. "Financial records, names of officers she paid off, recordings from inside the Richland Center. If she gets it all out of state, we'll lose jurisdiction. The Justice Department's too slow, and if it crosses the wrong desks, it disappears." Mariah's silence was measured, her eyes steady. "Then we don't let her leave." Jenkins hesitated. "I can't authorize direct action. Not yet. I'm one of 3 agents in this office who hasn't been reassigned, fired, or warned off. If you move first, you move alone." A long pause followed. Then Mariah leaned forward. "Alone is how we started," she said. "But we're not alone anymore." They disconnected. Back at the safe house, Mariah paced like a general before a storm. Her hand rested on the back of Anika's chair for just a moment, an anchor. The girl looked up from her tea, eyes clearer now, the sedation finally wearing off. She didn't need to speak. Her presence was all the motivation Mariah required. Diana gathered the team around a weathered wooden table. A map of Jasper County lay open in the center, covered in sticky notes, red marker paths, and satellite printouts. "We've got one shot," Diana began. "Camden's heading to the lodge tomorrow night. According to Agent Jenkins, it's heavily guarded but off the radar. No digital footprints, no wireless. Everything's analog. Which means," Kiara added, "we can't hack our way in. This is boots-on-ground work." Jordan traced a route along the edge of the property. "There's a service road here, about a half-mile through dense brush. No patrols. We can breach at the back of the perimeter fence, but once we're in, we've got 10 minutes tops before someone notices." "What are we expecting?" Mariah asked. Lena stepped forward. "Vault room in the basement. That's where they'd keep physical backups. Camden trusts paper over clouds." "And what about Camden?" Mariah's voice was flat. Kiara answered, "We found chatter. She's bringing in 2 private security contractors, military backgrounds, loyal to her. If she's cornered, she'll burn the place before she lets us get the files." Mariah folded her arms. "Then we take the lodge and the proof with it." No one spoke for a moment, and then Jordan gave a small grin. "Back in it," she said. "Feels like old times." But it wasn't the old times. It was something new, something bigger. They weren't just soldiers. They were mothers, daughters, survivors, and they were done asking permission. Kiara loaded the coordinates into their comms units. Lena packed trauma kits. Jordan cleaned her sidearm with precision. Diana double-checked the timing, the rotations, the alternate exits. And Mariah stood at the center of it all, no longer just a mother seeking justice, but the spark of something Camden had never planned for. A woman who had nothing left to fear. They would move before dawn. No arrests, no press, no second chances, just a mission. And as they closed the safe house doors behind them, the air changed. Not with dread, not even with rage, but with absolute clarity. Because in a game built to protect power, Mariah had just flipped the board. And this time, the Queen was moving. The rain came down in sheets, turning the dirt road into slick veins of mud and silence. No one spoke as the Artemis unit approached the hunting lodge buried deep in the woods. This place wasn't listed on any official records. It didn't need to be. It existed for men like Camden, men who built their empires in darkness and believed the wilderness would keep their secrets. But tonight, the woods had eyes. Mariah moved with the precision of a woman who'd counted her footsteps in combat zones. She didn't flinch as thunder cracked the sky above. She didn't hesitate as her boots pressed into soaked leaves. Beside her, Diana scanned the lodge through infrared. 3 heat signatures downstairs, 2 upstairs, 1 near the fireplace. She whispered, "That'll be Linda." Mariah nodded once. "Then we go in soft and fast." On the opposite ridge, Kiara hunched over a tablet covered with a rain shield, fingers dancing over code. Jordan watched the tree line, sniper scope, sweeping in slow, practiced arcs. Lena stood ready at the extraction point, ambulance disguise prepped and engine low. Inside, the atmosphere was falsely calm. Chief Camden poured himself a glass of scotch and stared at a weathered map of Oak Ridge. Linda sat beside the fire, her sidearm tucked into her waistband, legs crossed like a woman who'd never lost control of a room. But control was a myth now. Kiara's voice came through the comms. "You've got 30 seconds of blind spots, then I restored normal feed. Make them count." Mariah kicked the back door silently. Diana cleared left. Mariah moved forward like smoke. Hallway, turn, kitchen, step, then the den. And there she was. Linda Camden, the woman who pulled the trigger. The one who didn't flinch while Anika bled out. The one who smiled for cameras while feeding lies to the country. Linda didn't reach for her gun. She stood slowly, measured, a politician in uniform. "Well," she said, smoothing her jacket, "I was wondering how long it would take for the old dogs to come scratching at my door." Mariah didn't answer. She raised her phone slowly. Kiara's signal was ready. Live stream, encrypted, direct to an anonymous whistleblower server in 4 major journalist inboxes, audio and video rolling. "You're not going to shoot me," Linda said, stepping forward. "You're a mother, a soldier, sure, but you still believe in due process, don't you?" "I believe in proof," Mariah replied coldly, "and justice. And tonight, we will collect both." Linda's lip curled. "Your daughter was collateral. She wasn't supposed to die. It was supposed to be a message. You pushed too far, and we remind you who runs the game." Mariah's fingers didn't move. The phone remained steady. Recording, broadcasting. Her voice was calm, but her hands burned. "You admitted that on camera," Kiara whispered into her earpiece. "We've got it. It's going live." "What did you say?" Linda asked, sensing something shift. "I said," Mariah repeated, louder now, "you just confessed to ordering a federal hate crime on a minor, on my daughter, live, to over 7 million viewers. And climbing." The color drained from Linda's face. Outside, tires cracked branches. Flashlights swept across the fog. Dozens of red and blue beams cut through the trees. State troopers, tactical units. And at the front, Agent Jenkins, flanked by agents in full body armor. She pushed through the lodge's front door like judgment itself. "Linda Camden, by the authority of the state of Georgia and the Department of Justice, you are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and attempted murder," Jenkins declared. Diana stepped between Linda and her sidearm, already upholstered and held firmly in her own hand. Mariah exhaled, slow and steady. The rage hadn't left her body. It never would. But tonight, it had formed. Purpose. Voice. Linda's hands were cuffed. She looked at Mariah as she was led away, eyes no longer defiant, but hollow. "You don't understand what you've started," she hissed. "No," Mariah said, stepping back into the rain. "You don't understand what we've finished." As the state police secured the perimeter and evidence technicians began cataloging what Camden had hidden in that remote hunting compound, cash, files, burner phones, and blackmail folders, Mariah stood still, eyes cast to the forest canopy. For a moment, the storm quieted, but the story was far from over. Jenkins approached her carefully, voice low. "Chief Camden has a legal team already flying in. They'll try to suppress the footage, tie it up in motions. You've drawn blood, but now we take the war to the courts." Mariah didn't blink. "Then we fight on another front, because for every file buried in that cabin, there were hundreds more still protected by systems designed to erase the truth. But now, the world had seen it for what it was, and there was no going back." The courtroom lights burned cold under the weight of a nation's eyes. Every bench was filled. Cameras crowded behind the glass wall, their red record lights blinking like silent witnesses. Outside, protesters filled the courthouse steps, holding signs with Annika's name, with Mariah's face, with one demand: justice. But justice doesn't walk in through the front door. It fights its way through the metal detectors and legal loopholes. Mariah sat beside her legal team, stoic but never still. Her fingers remained clenched, not in fear, but in resistance. This was not a trial about guilt or innocence. It was about truth versus a machine that had long survived on distortion. Annika entered next. The quiet in the courtroom shifted. Her wheelchair moved slowly, each turn of the wheel echoing across marble floors. Her hair was tied back, her eyes, no longer dulled by medication, burned with clarity. She looked older than she had months ago, not in age, but in cost. When she reached the front row, she locked eyes with Linda Camden, seated at the defense table. Camden wore a tailored suit, court-approved makeup, and the smug composure of someone who still believed her badge made her untouchable. The prosecutor began with cold precision, presenting Kiara's metadata logs, the audio recordings, the surveillance cuts spliced together to form a timeline of corruption, collusion, and concealment. Each clip was a nail. Each file was a hammer. The room stiffened as the footage from the hunting lodge was played. Linda's voice rang out in real time across the speakers. She was collateral. It was supposed to be a message. Gasps, then silence. Camden's attorney rose for cross-examination with the kind of arrogance only money could buy. His tone was clean, his rhythm precise. He accused Annika of exaggerating her trauma. He hinted that the Artemis unit's actions were coordinated with militant aims. Then he played his final card. "Elijah Price," he said smoothly, "former data technician at Oak Ridge Medical. A man close to the investigation. A man with nothing to gain." Mariah turned slowly. Elijah entered, flanked by court officers. He looked different, clean-shaven, suited and coached. Gone was the cold defector in the server room. Now he was a witness wrapped in white paper lies. He took the stand and, under oath, said the footage had been edited, that the recordings could not be authenticated, that Mariah had threatened him into compliance. "Miss Reynolds," the attorney asked, turning to the jury, "is not the hero you think she is. She's a disgraced veteran with an agenda, who weaponized her daughter's tragedy for a war she never stopped fighting." Mariah didn't move. She didn't blink, but her jaw tightened like a coiled fist. The prosecutor stood slowly. "Mr. Price," she asked calmly, "can you tell this court who authorized the deletion logs found under your ID?" Elijah hesitated. It was brief, but it was enough. "No further questions," she said. The defense had planted its seed of doubt, not because it was right, but because it was well-funded. And systems like these didn't need to prove innocence. They only needed to confuse clarity. Annika turned her head toward the judge. Then slowly she turned to Mariah. "May I?" she whispered. Mariah's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" Annika nodded once. The court called a recess. During the break, an emergency motion was filed. With Mariah's support and her own insistence, Annika requested to be sworn in, not as a victim, but as a witness in full. As the judge returned, so did the crowd. A buzz grew in the air. Mariah stood, rolled Anika's chair toward the front, then stepped back. The courtroom waited. And then, slowly, Annika gripped both armrests, pressed down, and pushed. Her legs shook, her knees buckled, but she stood, not gracefully, not steadily, but unmistakably, and on her own. The air inside the courtroom was stifling, not from heat, but from anticipation. Everyone in the room knew this wasn't just another sentencing. This was the culmination of a battle that had unfolded in headlines, in live streams, in hospital wards, in backroom edits, and on a blood-stained sidewalk. And now, every eye in the room turned toward the young black girl rising from her seat, refusing to be carried, refusing to be framed by anything but her own determination. Anika Reynolds stood without assistance. The silence was so complete, even the hum of the overhead lights seemed to vanish. Mariah didn't breathe. No one did. Not until Anika took her first step forward, steady, slow, and utterly unshaken. She moved toward the witness stand, not like a survivor, but like a storm that had learned to walk upright. Every flashbulb from the gallery, every tapping journalist's keystroke seemed to be asking the same question. How? And then she spoke, voice calm and precise. Your Honor, members of the court, and anyone still trying to explain this away as a misunderstanding, let me make something clear. She paused. They didn't just want to kill me. They wanted to kill the future of girls like me. They wanted to assassinate potential, to broadcast a message that we're disposable. And they wrapped that hatred in policy, in protocol, in mistakes. Her gaze swept across the room, past the prosecutor, past her mother, until it landed on the people who had once dared to call her dangerous. I was 16 years old, a cheerleader, a daughter. I had ID. I had manners, and I still ended up on the pavement with 3 bullets in my chest. The judge sat still, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. They said I was hostile. I wasn't. They said I lunged. I didn't. They said their footage was missing, but somehow their stories were all the same. A few jurors swallowed hard. An older woman in the back wiped her eyes. But this wasn't just about me. This was about making people afraid to raise their voices, to raise their daughters, to raise any kind of resistance. Because when you're black and you fight back, you're labeled a threat. And when you stay silent, they erase you anyway. Anika paused again, longer this time. So I chose to walk, to show you that no amount of trauma, no cocktail of sedatives, no system of silence could keep me from standing in my own name. There were no interruptions, no scoffs, just the sound of one girl's truth cutting through years of scripted lies. I don't need pity, she said. I don't need applause. I need consequences. I need a country that stops putting price tags on our lives and starting salaries on their cover-ups. She turned slightly, looking toward the table where Linda Camden now sat in cuffs. Her expression hardened not by shame, but by loss of control. For the first time, she was not holding the gun, not authoring the narrative. You took my blood and tried to wash your guilt in it. You took my voice and tried to remix it into your alibi. You used the system like a weapon, but forgot that weapons can be turned around. Anika stepped back. Her legs trembled faintly as she returned to her chair, but no one dared to call her weak. The judge took his time. He reviewed the files before him, but it was ceremonial now. The nation had already heard its verdict. When he finally spoke, the words were slow, clear, and final. Lieutenant Linda Camden, this court finds you guilty of aggravated assault, falsification of public records, obstruction of justice, conspiracy and abuse of power under color of law. You are hereby sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Gasps broke out across the room. Some cried, some clapped, but no one argued. The judge continued. This court also recognizes the coordinated corruption that enabled your actions. Investigations into the Oak Ridge Department and associated agencies have led to the indictment of 6 additional officials involved in evidence tampering, medical record falsification, and federal civil rights violations. For a moment, the room felt larger than itself. Justice had always been a narrow hallway for families like the Reynoldses, barely lit, full of locked doors. But today, one of those doors had been kicked open. Mariah stood, her hand gently resting on Anika's shoulder. She didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She simply nodded once toward her daughter. It was not a gesture of relief. It was recognition. Annika had spoken for every child who never made it to the stand. A reporter's voice could be heard whispering into a microphone, "This is not just a case. This is a reckoning." Outside, the crowds were already gathering. News tickers crawled across screens. Former police lieutenant sentenced to life for shooting black teen. But none of that mattered as much as what happened in the next breath. As the courtroom slowly began to clear, a small girl in the back, no older than 8, tugged at her mother's sleeve and pointed to Anika. "She looks like me," the girl whispered. Her mother nodded. "She looks like all of us." And that was the legacy. Not just the ruling, not just the time served, but the truth was spoken out loud, under oath, in front of cameras and cowards and survivors alike. Anika Reynolds had taken her first step, not just out of a wheelchair, but into history. The bronze letters on the glass door read, "The Reynolds Foundation for Justice and Healing." They gleamed under the morning sun, not polished for vanity, but for clarity. This wasn't just a name. It was a declaration. Inside the newly restored downtown office, the walls were lined not with glossy awards or sanitized mission statements, but with portraits, faces of survivors, victims, truth-tellers. Each one carried a story the system tried to bury. Each one was now part of a movement no one could silence. Mariah Reynolds stood by the window, watching people file into the small hall for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. She wore black slacks, a deep navy blouse, and a pin on her collar, Anika's old cheer badge. Her posture was calm, but her presence radiated something harder to name: conviction forged in grief. It had been a year since the trial, a year since the courtroom erupted in applause when the verdict came down, a year since Linda Camden's booking photo had replaced her badge in the public memory. But for Mariah, justice wasn't a finish line. It was a beginning carved from flame. Across the room, Anika adjusted the microphone at the podium. Her posture was no longer hesitant. She stood like someone who knew her voice mattered. Now, 18 and freshly accepted into NYU law, she carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who had bled for her place in the world and refused to let that place be taken. Dr. Natalie Chen approached Mariah quietly, carrying a stack of patient applications for the Foundation's free trauma clinic. Her hands trembled slightly, residue of guilt, of complicity, of courage that came late but still mattered. "They're showing up," Dr. Chen said softly. "Young, old, mothers, brothers, they're showing up." Mariah nodded, because they finally see someone looking back at them who won't flinch. Diana Flores joined them, now full-time director of strategy for the Foundation. She had left her post with the military a month after the trial, trading tactical orders for policy memos, armor for advocacy. "We've got funding locked through next year," Diana reported. 3 new legal fellows. "We're even getting requests to help set up satellite centers." Mariah let the words settle, but didn't smile. Not yet. The cost was still too fresh. A hush fell over the room as Anika stepped to the mic. Cameras clicked. A few in the front row held their breath. "When they fired 3 bullets into me," Anika began, "they didn't just try to kill a body. They tried to kill a possibility." She scanned the crowd, eyes unwavering. "They thought they could erase me. But what they did was spark something they couldn't control." A ripple of emotion moved through the audience. "I've been called a victim, a miracle, a symbol, but today I want to speak as something else, an architect, because what they tried to destroy, we're rebuilding, brick by brick, story by story, lawsuit by lawsuit." She gestured behind her toward the open office doors. "This building isn't about charity, it's about justice. It's about giving people the tools to fight back, to expose corruption, to confront erasure, to demand something better than survival." Her voice did not shake. "They shot the daughter of a soldier, but all they did was launch a war they couldn't win." Applause erupted, raw, spontaneous, rising from every corner like a collective exhale. Mariah didn't clap. She stood still, absorbing every word. For once, the weight on her chest wasn't grief. It was pride so sharp it almost hurt. Later, as guests mingled and volunteers passed out coffee, Mariah slipped away to the back office. Anika followed her in, closing the door softly behind her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Anika said, "I didn't write that line to be dramatic." Mariah turned. "I know you didn't. They really thought ending me would end you." Mariah stepped closer. "They didn't know who I was. They didn't know who you'd become." They embraced, not as survivor and protector, but as equals, each having fought their own war and won something bigger than vengeance. "Dad would have been proud," Anika whispered. Mariah's voice caught in her throat. "He would have called you a force of nature." Anika smiled through the mist in her eyes. "And you? What would he call you?" Mariah didn't hesitate, the one who lit the match. Back in the lobby, a small girl stood in front of one of the Foundation's displays. It showed a timeline of systemic abuse, doctored police reports, and the long chain of families shattered by silence. But it ended with a mirror, just a plain one at kid height with words etched above it. "You belong in the fight. They cannot erase you." The girl reached up and touched her reflection. That was the goal. Not revenge, not headlines. Legacy. They hadn't just tried to kill a girl. They had tried to kill a generation's hope. And all they'd done was ignite a wildfire with a name. Justice. The same kind of fire that now burned in every room of the Reynolds Foundation. The kind that couldn't be contained. The sun hung low over the Arlington sky, casting long shadows across rows of white marble headstones. The air held that strange stillness reserved for sacred ground, where war stories rested beneath the soil, and silence spoke louder than speeches ever could. Mariah Reynolds stood beside her daughter at the base of a gravestone that bore no grand title, no medals carved in stone, just a name. Staff Sergeant Mitchell Reynolds. Husband, father, soldier. Anika carried a small box in her hands. Inside it, a ribbon of deep indigo, a pin shaped like a phoenix rising, and a folded letter she had written but never sent. Slowly, deliberately, she knelt and placed the medal on the cool stone. "Dad," she whispered, "I won." Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't need to. Everything she had endured, the bullets, the hospital walls, the courtroom lights, the viral shame, led to this one moment of quiet defiance. Not against death, but against the systems that thought they could erase her. Mariah didn't cry. She placed a firm hand on her daughter's shoulder, eyes fixed on the name etched in granite. "They thought you were just a file number, a case, a mistake," Mariah murmured. "They didn't realize they were dragging an entire bloodline into their lie." She paused, letting the wind move through the trees like a benediction. "They didn't know they picked the wrong family." Anika stood, dusted the grass from her knees, and linked her arm through her mother's. They didn't need to say more. There was nothing left to prove. As they turned to leave, the camera lingered, not on their faces, but on the name. A name that had been tarnished by the media, scrubbed from police records, used in slanderous hashtags. But here, in this place, it stood untouched. Not because the world suddenly became just, but because justice had been forced into the world by two women who refused to stay quiet. And some names, no matter how much the world tries to bury them, become carved into the conscience of a generation. This was never just about Anika. It's about every black daughter who deserves to grow up unafraid. In a world where truth is often buried beneath headlines, and justice moves too slowly for the mothers who've already lost too much, Mariah Reynolds stood up, not as a soldier, not even as a hero, but as a mother who refused to let her daughter's name be rewritten by those in power. This wasn't just a story of survival, it was a declaration. That silence can be broken, that system can be held accountable, that a black girl's life is not expendable, and her future is not negotiable. Because when the system failed, it was love, resilience, and unwavering defiance that turned one woman's pain into a national reckoning. So now, we ask you, what names do you believe the world should never forget? Drop them in the comments below, and if this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe so these voices are never erased again. Justice doesn't end here. It starts with remembering.